Why are the Georgia Bulldogs fighting at practice? It's preseason camp. Why can't we be friends? I got more on that in a little bit. I wanted to talk to you about the first few days of practice at Georgia, what's jumping out the most at people. I've got a full written report on this. Go to dogpost.com. I don't have the link down below immediately because I'm still finishing it up. I like to talk to as many people as possible before I publish it. But, I'll start with this group, and Kirby, talked about it the other day. Um, the running backs are definitely people are paying attention to the running backs. And I don't know, I don't know if it's because, like they're just blowing people away or not or what, but, with the addition of Trevor Etienne and then the bringing Branson Robinson back, there's just a lot of momentum right now at running back in terms of people that are kind of chirping around the program. You got Nate Frazier, Branson Robinson, Roderick Robinson, Dwight Phil. I mean, I'm gonna not name people, but they have legitimately got a very good running back group. The thing about ETN that I want to just spotlight for a second here is there are people that I talk to, not necessarily at Georgia, although they probably share this sentiment, which is that there's a feeling that Florida didn't use him the right way, and I think that if that's the case, coupled with this offensive line, that this is going to be a really good season at Georgia running the football. And last season was pretty good, but I just want to stick with me here on this. Cash Jones was important for Georgia last season. I mean, I don't know if he scored against Florida State. He scored an important touchdown against South Carolina in a game that they won by 10. So his touchdown, Cash Jones' touchdown, prevented that game from being some sort of weird, deal. I don't know if it was 10 or not. I'm gonna look it up real quick. I might have been a little bit off with that, but it was an important touchdown nonetheless. They won by 10. He's gonna be number 7 this year. That's what I'm saying is they're very deep at running back. And then I go back to this quote from Kirby because he doesn't just say things, and I think that it's important to listen to him when he says things that are just so I don't know, definitive. I mean, maybe this wasn't as definitive as I'm thinking it was. He says, I mean, it's a whole quote, but he says, "I think we've got a room of good backs, as talented as we have had, but they're inexperienced." I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Make sure y'all checking out Dog Post. We've got Dylan Everett's story. We've got, the discussion about the wide receivers. These are premium stories, so you're going to have a subscription. And the good news is right now, just for instance, at the top of it, you can get $1. You can get Dog Post for $1 until the Alabama game. So you pay $1 right now, and you get it until the Alabama game kicks off. That's a really good deal. All of our competitors, I'm sure they have good deals. They don't have that. So go ahead and lock in for this, the beginning of this season and see what Dog Post can do for you. That premium insider story is going to be out later tonight. And I was talking about earlier the, why are guys fighting at a football, why are they fighting at football preseason camp? Because it's preseason football camp, and that's what the big guys do sometimes. If you've played football and not gotten into a fight, I would even say you probably were just a quarterback and that's it. Because everybody else, we got into fights in basketball in college, and there weren't pads. There were guys. We had fights. Now let me just say this about fights. They are not constructive, generally speaking. They reinforce that you have not as much discipline as you need. And here's what I mean by that. If you just went around swinging on anybody that made you angry in a moment when you didn't want to be angry, that would be chaotic. And in sports, that gets you thrown out of the game, a 15-yard penalty. It reinforces the momentum from the other team because you're aggravated for a reason. And really, it just means you're not ready to play. Brendan Cox against Georgia in 21, I think it was, or maybe 22, I can't remember. Might have been 22, swinging on guys, and I think it was Billy that let him go. He had to. I mean, you can't have that. It's not okay. Now, in early August, I would argue if you're not having fights or maybe guys aren't going hard enough, I don't know. I mean, it's a part of preseason football, but it cannot go, like this isn't something that you just repeat. This is like a one-time thing because, again, it gets back to discipline. And I'm not even going to say what happened or who it was with because it's just we have a pretty big audience and there's no point in all that. But what I would say is it's usually guys that are bigger guys and younger guys. But anyway, it's great being physical. It's not great not having the mental toughness to shut it off immediately. Like, the thing about when you get pissed off in a sport, whether it's football, basketball, tennis, I mean, 100% of the time or 99% of the time, there's a next play. And you have to play that next play. And if you're not ready to go because you're angry, the other guys are winning in a way that you're not going to be able to physically overcome because you're too worried about how angry you are. So anyway, I think at quarterback too, we're going to see, and again, I'm going off the top of my head here. You're going to want to make sure you're checking out the article over on the site. It'll say insider or what we're hearing, stuff like that. Don't miss out on the finer points. And we got such a great deal right now. $1 for like 8 weeks. Take advantage. But I think at quarterback, Matt and I released a video after the first day of practice. Let's just see how quarterback progresses, like backup, because you never know when you're going to need your backup. In 16, the guy that started the season didn't finish it. In 17, the guy that started didn't finish it. In 21, the guy that started it didn't finish it. In 20, the guy that started it didn't finish it. It happens. I mean, like, you're talking about almost half the time at Georgia, the starter doesn't finish. And that means someone else is. So let's just, let's be cognizant of that. With that said, Gunnar Stockton's going to get pushed. If there were if Georgia's playing tomorrow, and I think even for a while, coming off the bench, it'd probably be Gunnar Stockton. But I think Ryan Puglisi is like, people are aware of him. Let me put it to you like that. And here's my caveat with that, having covered 24 Georgia fall practices, 24 years of Georgia fall camp. Just because a person can throw a football does not mean they can play quarterback. Those are not the same thing. One is a part of what one does, and the other one is throwing a football. So there's a lot that goes on there, and in these moments, a lot of times people, when they see someone because you got to remember, Puglisi was hurt in the spring for a lot of the time. And then you get around the whole program's there, and like guys who hadn't seen him throw a lot or at all, then they kind of are like, wow, Gunnar Stockton's a fighter. He's been a really good player. And let me just add this caveat or note, which is that, after the 2021 UAB game, Georgia played South Carolina the next week in Athens. And Georgia basically opened up the starting quarterback position. It was either going to be Stetson or it was going to be JT. That's the way the story's been told to me several times. Now, we know that JT was the presumed starter and all this stuff, and he went on to be the starter. But if you don't, remember, Stetson played in the first half of that game, threw an interception actually, and so the plan was to get him in. They are not going to stop competing just because someone's really good. And Georgia has some really good players at quarterback, at running back. I think what we're looking at running back, in my opinion, so as a person who's been around this enough, you expect a lot of positivity coming out of fall camp. at the beginning. And then there's scrimmages and people get worried. And then there's some scrimmages and people get excited. It's so hard to really judge where Georgia's at with stuff. However, let me just say this. While Georgia's figuring out the offensive line, remember they have 4 starters of the 5. The question is, where are they all going to start? And who will the 5th person be? Okay, they've got 30. Well, now they got 27-ish practice. They have 27-ish practices left, but they've really got about like 13 practices left to figure out, okay, this is what we're doing. So in that time, they're going to roll some guys in and out on the offensive line. I think there were some notable things on the offensive line that happened today that I'm not going to talk about on the video. You're going to have to check out the website for that. But what I think people who are big Georgia fans should be like, oh, we can work with that. The way people are talking about the running backs right now is, to me, something to pay attention to. Georgia's running backs in the recent past have been good players. They have not been players that you are going to be, there's not been a DeAndre Swift. There's been a James Cook, and I would say James Cook is the same universe of what I'm talking about right now. I think there's some, I think there is some optimism in Athens that they've got that sort of explosion, and not just from one guy. They've got like so many different types too. Like I remember, so John Fabris was the defensive ends coach at Georgia under Mark Richt, and produced Quentin Moses, David Pollock, Charles Grant. These were like epic defensive ends. Two of those guys were. David was a 3-time All-American. Charles Johnson was amazing in the NFL. And Fab's deal was, man, I want different types of guys. And he had that. David was not at all like Quentin, was not at all like Marcus Howard. So in these running backs here, you've got different types now. Like this past year, they had bruisers. You were in trouble if you were in the 4th quarter against Georgia. The only team that survived that was Alabama, and they had the lead. So now you have, for sure, a speed guy in Dwight Phillips. And how much Dwight will play, I don't know. I'm just saying. You have a speed guy for sure. And then you've got, you've got both Robinsons who are bruisers, okay? And, there's a lot of optimism about Branson Robinson. But let's just see how it goes, and take it from there. But Frazier and Etienne are probably more sort of sudden than the Robinsons are. But there's so much to pick from now suddenly. Now you've got to change, Del McGee's at Georgia State, getting ready to try to trip up Georgia Tech in his opener as a coach. So you've got transition there. You've got transition in the secondary. you've got guys, at wide receiver. You got Coley over there now. We'll talk about the receivers here soon. Arian Smith. These guys Kirby and them are going to pressure. Now's the time to pressure these guys. If you can't survive the run-up to the Clemson game, you're not going to win the national championship. You're not going to be ready for when Ohio State's breathing down your neck or when Texas got you on the ropes on the road. You're not going to be ready. Now is when you have to do it, and you have to do it in the heat. I do not run the program at Georgia. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm qualified to talk about it. That's it. One fight is one thing, and it's a lesson you can learn. But the big thing about that whole thing, okay, is get it out of your system. We're done. And this is about discipline. This is one of the most disciplined programs in the country. They just don't. They do the right thing. Oh, they play the right way. They play the way that South Carolina women's basketball team plays the right way. Dawn Staley, Georgia's football team, they play that. They play the right way. And You don't always win the national championship. Even when you have the best team, Dawn Staley's team knows about that too. But you cannot let the undisciplined silliness because you're tired, hot, or angry, or all three, that can't come in there. If you want to go develop and get after it, you have to do it within the barriers of the game and the practice. But I think there's like that is concerning. How concerning, and then the running backs, people are optimistic. That's all I'm saying. Thanks for watching.